Hi everybody. So here we are proceeding with this top. So as you may remember from our last episode, we have a nice piece of spruce glued up with a piece of parting paper in the joint so that we can take it apart easily. And we've also used some parting paper to glue the top material down to the MDF or fiberboard backing that we're going to use to help hold it while we're carving. We're going to employ a router to take a little cut in here and define the thickness of the edge roughly, so that we have a place to cut to. So we're going to cut a groove around all the way around the plate at about this height, and here's how that goes. Now, first of all, I don't use routers a lot in my work, but sometimes they're very handy, and this is one of those times. Anyway, so this one, I got the bit for this cutter from Rockler. It's a supplier, and I got it because it has a nice 1/2-inch shank. You can see it's got a good follower bearing. It's a real, it's a quality thing, and it comes with a wing cutter and various washers and nuts, etc. So here's what I'm doing today is we're going to put the bearing on first, and then in order to get the longest distance between here and here that we can get, because after all, this is kind of it's a big ask in terms of length. So that's our, because of this 1-inch section of MDF, we're going to want to get as much length as we can get. So I got this nut here that doesn't thread on, it's just a spacer. And then we're going to put this on, make sure it going the right way, and a nut. And that'll complete our setup. So we have a follower bearing and a cutter. And it's going to define the edge thickness of our part. So I'm going to swap over to the setup where that's going to happen, and I'll see you there. All right, so here we are at my scuzzy old router table, a piece of 1/2-inch Lexan, good tough stuff. And so I've set the cutter so that it's going to leave about 4.5 millimeters of material between the bottom of the cutter and the glue joint here with the paper, and it'll rub against the bearing. Unfortunately, well, it would be better if this were a little bit bigger, but I couldn't really find one in this format that was bigger. So we're going to get, just enough. You remember the plate is oversized by, I don't know, whatever it is, almost 8 millimeters, maybe, or 300 thousandths. And so this is going to cut only a little bit into our part, but still it'll deliver the information that we need, which is a place to stop. So I'm setting it at 4.5 millimeters-ish. And that's about 1 millimeter heavier than the final part will be before we're done with it. So we may come in and take another cut with this later. But just as a little bit of a safeguard when we're taking off a lot of wood with sharp tools, if we nick it a little bit, we'll have a little safety, okay? So now I'm just going to, power it up and run around the form, and we'll get a nice ledge that we can work to. Okay, so that came out nice, and I'll meet you all over at the bench in a minute. Here we are, ready to get a grip on this thing, and so I have this nice bench. I know you don't all have this, but it's got two sets of dogs with a long, a vise that's the full width of the bench, and actually it's why I bought this in the late 70s when I was building Archtoppery guitars in New York City. I got this bench specifically because it had this, and I knew I wanted to hold my archtop tooling in it. So you can see as we clamp this, this vise is skewing a little bit. It's taking up the spot, and then, that is nice and solid. So we know when we're taking a cut on this that we're not going to have any movement in the part. So we can just go ahead and push off the material. Now you'll see some people like to drive their gouges with a mallet, and that's okay. But if you get your gouge sharp, you should be able to push it through spruce at least. And you can see how a lot of wood is coming off pretty quickly. All right. So we're going to go ahead and rough it with the gouge, and after which we're going to use a scrub plane. Now, a scrub plane is a plane that's straight on the bottom but curved across its width. Here's one I made out of lignum vitae and a nice Japanese plane iron. In probably, I don't know, 1976, I think. And then here's another plane. This is an Ulmia brand plane, nice German plane that was designed as a smoothing plane. But, I got in the table saw and cut out these chunks and then curved the bottom. So this is another spoon plane that I made and modified. So this is really a nice tool for this kind of thing, and it straightens out the gouging. So you get a nice straight line across the plate. And what we're going to do is try and establish the longitudinal curve at the top first. So we're going to work down both ends of this and leave the center high. And we're going to use these roughing tools. This one isn't doing a lot of roughing right now. Maybe I'll set that a bit deeper. So this is a little hammer that's made in Japan, and it's designed just for setting plane blades. And it has little figures on it. Anyway. There we go. it's important with these tools that you set them big enough to do some work, but not so big that you're struggling to use it, right? So you want to be able to get into a nice rhythmic motion that you can sustain without hurting yourself. And I submit that it's just so much better to have a plane that you can get both hands on. And turns out this is really pretty fun. And you get to learn about the material you're cutting at the same time. Oh, looks like I'm taking a little bit more off this side than that side, so I'll try and make a correction. Well, and so on. So I'm going to keep working on this, and I will get back with you when I've defined this curve, and we'll talk about the curve I've chosen and the reasons for doing it that way. See you next time. Time to sharpen this guy. You leave it running. So, when is the time to sharpen your tool? The first time you think about it is the correct answer. When should you sharpen your tool? Probably right before you do anything important with it. So those are the rules of sharpening. And, we'll get into sharpening in some serious depth this year. One of the most important things about using edge tools, of course, is that they're no fun if they're not sharp. And now that you've seen in real time how much time and effort is invested in taking this tool from, well, sharp enough to cut but not that much fun, to, oh my gosh, I can't believe how well this works. It was just a few moments, right? So in the middle of all this fun, let me demonstrate this other tool. So this isn't really a scrub plane, but this one does have an iron in it that I've sharpened at a slight curve. You probably can't see that in the photo, but anyway, it's nice and sharp, and it's not straight across the way it might be for regular work. So it cuts, well, I'll show you here where it's flat. You can see that the shaving, well, this is the same plane we used before when we were flattening out this piece, before we went to the flat number 8 plane. So this tool has already been introduced on this project. It's a number 6, and it's a nice light plane. For being a big plane, it's quite light, and you can use it without a lot of fatigue. Get into a nice rhythmic stroke. So this surface isn't really ready for this kind of fine cut, but sometimes it's nice to just clean it up so you can see it. You can see what you've done, you know, which might involve looking at this. For example, this is a common way to judge your work, particularly useful later when we are going to try and judge the symmetry of our work left and right. But anyway, it's always nice to have a straight edge. Doesn't have to be a precision one. Just a stick of wood would even be fine for this. And so now we can kind of look at what we've done and maybe go back to a coarser cut. And now we have a nice flat surface to refer to. So if we're a little bit careful with this tool and guide it in a straight cut, and we get, okay, so welcome to archtop guitar making. Look at that, it's a little pitch pocket. Did we see any evidence of that? No. Will it come back to hurt our project? We don't know yet. Oh. Looks small. We'll have to see. Well, it's moving around. Not so big. I mean, we have a sense of humor, right? If that thing ended up in the guitar, we'd say, well, it's just the way the tree grew. Little beauty mark. You know, when I first was visiting Jimmy DeQuisto, I asked him all kinds of stupid questions, including, I asked him, you know, kind of, gee, Mr. DeQuisto, what do you do when the wood isn't perfect? And he said, Ken, the wood tries harder. So I've always remembered that. And I like to think that defects are unavoidable in life. Sometimes they can be remediated. Sometimes you just have to accept them. Okay, so we could also use the straight edge right now to just try and see that we got the right space on both sides. Of course, we could always measure with a ruler what our, what our space is here and here. But it's just important to try and keep an eye on it so that, so that we don't end up doing something like this while we're not noticing. All right. Well, back to work. So here is where the long handle of this gouge, every cut that thing is different. The long handle of this gouge is starting to really pay off because I can change the depth of cut by adjusting the angle of the handle, and the longer that is, the more leverage I have on it, and the easier it is to keep the cut even from side to side. Not always perfect. Well, our defect is getting larger and less wonderful. Let's see how this goes. We'll see about that. We don't know yet. Well, I think I'm going to flip it around and pull the same move on the other side, and then we're going to talk about the shape of this longitudinal curve. All right. Here's where I wish I had a wider gouge. Can I pause for a station break? Be right back with another gouge. So, this is a beautiful antique James Swan Company gouge. And as you see, it's got the bevel on the inside. And this is called either a pairing gouge or an in-canal gouge. And this isn't sharp, but the way this is kind of a pattern maker's tool, the way it's used is sort of like a chisel that's curved on the back side. So it would be used to refer to a surface and extend it or whatever. I mean, the idea is that this surface would often be in contact with the material, unlike a gouge that's sharpened in the usual way that we use beveled down, right? But I always thought, since I don't really have a use for this, that it would be fun to grind this like this tool. In other words, to make a beveled down gouge with a smile. And as you can see, that would require removing quite a lot of material to get that to happen. But I still may do it because right now I'm up against the limits of what this gouge can do as a rougher because of its width. So when I go to take a really deep cut, it digs in on one side and doesn't really, it's not really what you would want. Although it's working so well, I shouldn't be complaining, right? And if any of you are wondering, this is really fun. It's challenging, but it's real woodworking. And this is when you start to make friends with your piece of wood and learn about it and figure out how it cuts, how it sounds. You're always listening. As an instrument maker, you're always listening to what things sound like. Now, of course, we know anytime if I think I'm getting lumpy and bumpy here with a gouge, I can just switch over to either this tool, which still takes off quite a lot of material, as you can see, or to refine the surface a little bit so we can figure out where we're at. So in not very long, really, we've removed quite a lot of material. And I'm going to just proceed with the gouge a little bit here on the butt end of the guitar. You know, it's kind of nice to do it in this order where you get your chops together on the convex side of the plate. Not that there aren't some concave areas here, but of course when we flip it over, pretty much all the surfaces are concave and they're more challenging. So we'll pick up some speed in our skill set as we do the outside, and look forward to using it on the inside when we get to flip it all over. Well, it looks like it's coming out pretty good. It's a little bit hard to keep the cut going quite as deep on the far away side here, and even though I haven't got a lot in my way, there's a bunch of vice jaw sticking out here, and this darn thing is kind of in my way. So it's a little hard to get my upper body over this other side, this far away side over here. So what I'm saying is that the cut's coming out a tiny bit lighter on that side, so that's why I'm looking and checking to make sure I keep it pretty well straightened out. Of course, it's easier to do with this plane because it's nice and long. Your hands are far apart. And you can kind of keep your energy directed over the forward part of the plane. Well, I don't know. That might be enough for right now. I'm going to have some lunch and think about this shape a little bit.